thank you also for the opportunity to be here in New Hampshire, and I'm glad this is one of the few places I've gone to that I could drive to in hours. So it was a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak not too far from where I live in the Boston area. Let me begin by talking about some of the issues with the English language arts standards, which I know ad nauseum from both having dealt with them in Massachusetts and from having been on Common Core's Validation Committee. Let me point out the big generalizations that I'd like you to take away from my talk. First, you have to remember that Common Core standards are not rigorous. You're going to hear parrots all the time telling you how rigorous they are, and they are not. They were designed to allow the middle 40% of our grade 11 students to enroll in credit-bearing courses in a non-selective college. And I can supply you with references for that, but these are statements that I'll give you without giving you the citations as well. Secondly, Common Core standards are not internationally benchmarked and will not make any of our students competitive. Despite the ad that Exxon ran during the national tennis matches about over a month or so ago, it is simply not the case. And the poor education director at Exxon simply could not name a country to which we were benchmarked, but nevertheless they're going around telling everybody they're benchmarked. There is no research to support Common Core's stress on writing instead of reading. It should be the opposite. And reading is my graduate school background. There is no research to support Common Core's stress on informational reading instead of literary reading in the English class. And there is certainly no research to support the value of the cold reading of historical documents. In other words, you look at historical documents without any knowledge of their context. Available research actually suggests exactly the opposite of what Common Core's chief architect promotes in the English language arts classroom. And I'll get to those chief architects in a few minutes. Let me give you what I see as some of the major flaws or things you may see in children's or grandchildren's classrooms. First of all, most of Common Core's college readiness and grade level reading standards are content-free skills. Like find the main idea, something you can apply to Three Little Pigs or to Moby Dick. A skill is independent of the quality and the level of education of whatever you apply it to. It can be applied to anything. Common Core standards require no British literature aside from Shakespeare. They require no authors from the ancient world. They do not require study of the history of the English language, and they do not, for the most part, specify the literary historical knowledge that students need. So without requirements like this in place, students are simply not prepared for college coursework. It doesn't matter that they are called college readiness standards, they are not preparing students for college. This is part of what I call the fork-tongue approach by politicians at the highest level, unfortunately, in this country, and it moves all the way down through boards of education and departments of education, and even to superintendents who simply repeat what they've been told. The second issue that I mentioned a little bit is that Common Core expects English teachers to spend over 50% of their reading instructional time at every grade level on informational texts. This is a percentage from which students cannot benefit intellectually. First, there's no body of information that English teachers have ever been responsible for teaching, and this is not what English teachers are prepared to teach from their college English departments or their teacher preparation programs, but the standards weren't written with those concerns in mind. You just have to understand that this division, which was someone's brainchild maybe in the middle of the night, has been built into your national standards, never approved by English teachers, never approved by any scholars at the college level, and yet has become something that is affecting every high school curriculum in this country, for the most part, except for the few states that have kept away. And English teachers are now adding something called informational text, and you may be told, oh, well, nothing else is being touched. But the school year hasn't been lengthened and the school day hasn't been lengthened. So obviously, if you do the arithmetic, you know that something is being taken away. You can't add at one end and not take away. And what's being taken away are certain kinds of literary studies. It means, in many cases, and I've heard this from English teachers, that they will study excerpts instead of whole plays or novels. So that's how your students will be prepared for college. Third, Common Core reduces opportunities for students to develop critical thinking. One of the major claims of Common Core is that it will develop critical thinking, it will produce deeper learning, deeper than what we don't know, it will shine your hair, it will brush your teeth, it will do whatever, it will produce collaboration, it will do all these wonderful things, and it's not clear how simple words on paper will do any of that. All we know, historically as well as empirically, is that when English teachers have in the past taught complex literary texts, they have taught students how to read between the lines, and that is how one learns how to do analytical thinking, which is what they mean by critical thinking. 4, Common Core standards stress writing more than reading at every grade level. Now, this is simply not supported by any body of research or common sense. Good writers come from being good readers. Reading precedes writing, and you will see an awful lot of writing in Common Core classes, but it's not going to be terribly useful unless the kids have done a lot of reading at home, in school, and have done good reading. Every good writer will tell you that the basis of good writing is good reading. Finally, Common Core's writing standards are developmentally inappropriate at many grade levels. And right now there is a YouTube being developed that was from a child developmental psychologist who has looked at some of these early grade, particularly early grade standards, and shown how inappropriate developmentally they are for very, very young children. I will go on to talk about now why we have some of these issues in what were supposed to be validated standards. As was mentioned by the introducer, I was on Common Core's validation committee. This was a committee that was set up in 2009. There were 25 to 29 of us, and as its name suggests, we were to validate the standards, which meant we were to make sure they were internationally benchmarked, research-based, rigorous, and so on. The committee, unfortunately, never was able to do anything with its charge, and I can't tell you what the committee actually did because we all had to sign confidentiality statements at our first meeting, promising never to tell anybody about what this committee did. I can tell you what I wrote and what I did, but I can't tell you about what this committee did.
Croc TV.